We're discussing the Mitteler Rebbe. The Mitteler Rebbe is saying, in the middle of saying, Chassidus, Shah, even though it was quiet. He was not screaming Shah at the people. He was screaming Shah at his brain. His brain was running so fast that he had to scream Shah to quiet himself. I think it's fair to say, it's a very stupid idea to compare one Rebbe to another. The Rebbe once said, "Mekenish medam is an anok to an anok, one giant to another." It's just foolish to try and compare the Rebbeim. But I think it's fair to say that of all the 7 Rebbeim of Chabad, the Rebbe who was the most beprecious, who was least in this world, was the Mitteler Rebbe. He really was not in this world. And there's a common stories about that, which I'll share some of them soon. So in a lot of ways, the Mitteler Rebbe was here. When you read about the Mitteler Rebbe's Nesius, the impression that you get is the Mitteler Rebbe didn't bring the Eibishter into the world. He took his Chassidim up to Atzilus. During the Mitteler Rebbe's Nesius, which is only 15 years, it's a very short Nesius. It's the shortest of any of the Chabad Rebbeim. He raised his Chassidim to a different universe. Really, it's not to be believed. But on the other hand, even though the Mitteler Rebbe was such a Parosh and the rest, there were certain things about the Hanhag of the Mitteler Rebbe that were unbelievably practical. He was in other words, he was a contradiction of a Yid who in his own life was such a himmeldike mensch, mamash a himmeldike mensch. But he was a Rebbe, he was a Nasi. There's a Rishima from the Rebbe where the Rebbe writes that from the Alter Rebbe, all the Rebbeim of Chabad were always involved in helping Yidden. Always involved in Askaras. There was no such thing as the Lubavitcher Rebbe who thought only about his Chassidus, only about his Chassidim. They all were involved in Askaras. And the Mitteler Rebbe, although on the one hand, he was so Parosh, on the other hand, there was a lot of things about the Mitteler Rebbe's Hanhag which are very, very interesting, down to earth. And the number one, I have a list. Point number 1 is what the Mitteler Rebbe did about the fight with the Misnagdim. Misnagdim Chassidim fought a war. But there's people who believe that fight still goes on. It's a Rachmanas of Zeh. And any time you hear a Misnagid say that the Vilna Gaon put Chassidim into Chedim and the Vilna Gaon could not have made a mistake, that Misnagid is sending the Vilna Gaon back to Gehenna with another dip. There's people today who still say the Gra couldn't have been wrong. The Gra couldn't have. He was so wrong. He was a Gadol, Yisroel. He was a God. He was an incredibly great man, but he was absolutely wrong. And the fight ended a long time ago, even though some people think the fight still continues. The fight with the Chassidim and Misnagdim started by the Baal Shem Tov. It heated up by the Mesicher Magid, and it became mamish terrible by the Alter Rebbe. And not just the Alter Rebbe and his Chaverim. But the last years of the Alter Rebbe's life, it really ended. Rabbi Beto Levin, the Rebbe's librarian, told me personally, as the tshuva for Chaim Volozhin. Chaim Volozhin was the greatest of Talmid Vilna Gaon, who writes that the Misnagdim outlawed shchita from sakinim milutashim. The Misnagdim outlawed meat that was shechted with the Chassidish chalaf. The Chassidish chalaf is actually, everyone uses this, sakinim milutashim. It's a sharper knife. It's the way I understand it is made from steel. It's made from a tougher metal, so it's thinner, and it's very sharp and very thin. In other words, before they developed steel, for a metal to be strong, it had to be very thick. If it's very, very thick, it could be glatt, it could be smooth, but it can't be sharp. If a knife is thicker, you can make it very smooth, but you can't make it very sharp. If the knife is thinner, you can make it very sharp, but it's hard to make it very smooth. So in the olden days, if you have a knife that you're shechting an animal and it's not very sharp, it's glatt, it's smooth, it's kosher, but you may have to go back and forth a few times. If you have a very sharp knife, you do it once, it's finished. We had knives, this is how I understand it. I'm not sure that Sakinim was made from a new material, which was both chad v'cholak, very sharp and very, very glatt. If the metal is thinner, it's much harder to make it smooth on the bumps. But the newer metals are stronger. This is how I understand it. Chassidim used Sakinim Motoshim, goes back to the Mesicher Magid. And the Misnagdim said that meat from Sakinim Motoshim is treif. Treif. So Chaim Volozhin wrote, we all knew the meat wasn't treif. We wanted to make a separation between us and Chassidim because of the machlokes. So we outlawed their shchita. And the Chaim Volozhin writes, Now that we know that Chassidim are Elach Yidden, that the flesh is kosher and the shechita knife is good and so on, during the Alter Rebbe's lifetime he wrote this. During the Alter Rebbe's lifetime of Chaim Volozhner wrote this. The Tshuva from Chaim Volozhner was the greatest of the Midim of the Vilna Gaon. So the machlekes got bad and worse and even worse, but it ended. But there was a lot of bad blood. A lot of bad blood. And also, the machlekes didn't end by them agreeing. Misnagdim remained Misnagdim. They don't want to learn Chassidus. They don't want to do derech avodah Chassidus. And Chassidim are Chassidim. So the hate ended. The charames ended. But there were still two communities. And there was a lot of bad blood. So the Mitteler Rebbe had a policy. It's so fascinating. The Mitteler Rebbe thought this through so practically. The Mitteler Rebbe's policy was the relationship with the Misnagdim is a cold war. We don't talk to them at all. You are not allowed to say hello to a Misnagdim. If you lived in a city where there was not enough people to make a Chassidish shul, the Mitteler Rebbe said, daven in your house. Kriyas HaTorah, stand by the window. Don't go into the shul. The Mitteler Rebbe had a strict policy of disengagement. The Mitteler Rebbe knew the Chassidim and Misnagdim are going to talk, they're going to argue, and the argument is going to get heated, and he's going to get crazy. So the Mitteler Rebbe says, Loi yidaber loi in Haitika Parshi, Shomel lecho b'yidaber b'yankim mitei v'adra. Don't say anything nice, just don't talk. It's in Haitika Parshi. Vayesi is a very, very long Parshi. The Chitas, the first couple of days is Mitrachmanas. It's Kuf Mem Ches Psukim, it's a very big Parshi. But near the end, when Lavan has this dream, he's angry, Hashem says, don't say a bad word. He's, I'll say a good word. No, don't tell him anything. No good, no bad. The Mitteler Rebbe had a policy, don't talk to the Misnagdim. At all. And it was a break. And it was 15 years. His Nasiya is 15 years. What it allowed for, if you will, is a cooling of the tempers. If enough time passes, the combatants, the people who fought were getting old, and their children were not being educated in the fight because there was nobody to fight with. By the time that Tzemach came along, there was real shalom. There was real shalom. But the Tzemach Tzedek, Chassidim and Misnagdim, there was real shalom. And you could argue, and again, I don't know, historians can discuss this, and I'm not a historian, that the Mitteler Rebbe's shita of this, like so to speak, this Cold War set the stage, and by his son-in-law, the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad, there would be real shalom, the Chassidim and Misnagdim. And the shalom Chassidim and Misnagdim lasted for a very long time. I mean, if you know Russian Jews, unsere Zaydes, Chassidim and Misnagdim intermarried. It wasn't even an issue in Rusland. They were Elach Yidden, the Chassidim were Elach Yidden, the Misnagdim were Elach Yidden. There was a difference in Shita. They maybe made fun of each other, but there was a perfect harmony. Today, the Misnagdim and Chassidim is all a new machlekes. But until the Second World War, they were different. They had different approaches to living and different shitas. We made fun of them for being uptight. They made fun of us for being drunk. But there was an enormous amount of cohesion. So the Alter Rebbe's generation was on Milchama. The Mitteler Rebbe said, we're not talking, we're not discussing it. There was a gzeira of the Mitteler Rebbe, you were not allowed to say hello to a Misnagdim. With Ake Dekach, they couldn't go into a Misnagdim shul. If you lived in a city where there was no Chassidish shul, you davened b'yechidus, and you stood by the window for Kriyas HaTorah, and you went home. By the time the Tzemach Tzedek became a Rebbe, the heat had subsided sufficiently for the Bishalom. This is an example of the Mitteler Rebbe's practical side. It was a practical way of solving a problem which was so old and so deeply entrenched. You have no idea. Go ahead.
What if someone wants to learn Chassidus?
I don't know the rules. I'm sure they were very happy to bring people into the fold. There were probably rules. But a Misnagid who wanted to remain a Misnagid, there was no conversation. Another thing which Mitteler Rebbe did, the Mitteler Rebbe, this, I've never traced it to a good source, but people say it, the Mitteler Rebbe had a gzeira against Mashke. Like the Rebbe made a gzeira against Mashke, which of course everybody keeps. None of your brothers and your fathers under 40 ever drink more than 4 l'chaims, as you all know, right? Your Khersoner is going to be completely sober by his l'chaim and by his kiddush and by the sheva berachas, because everyone keeps the gzeira. And the Rebbe ate his heart out about the gzeira. But the Mitteler Rebbe had a gzeira against Mashke. The Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim were, in another word, they were drunk from Chassidus. And saying l'chaim helps, apparently. And there's a shmur that the Mitteler Rebbe said, no Mashke, not a drink at all. He didn't want people to drink Mashke at all. But then they tell a story, a Maisa listed, that the Chassidim had a Fabrengen. But if you wanted to join the Fabrengen, you had to have Mesiras Nefesh. First thing, when the Mesiras Nefesh, you had to drink a glass of spirit. You had to be over the Gezerah in the Mitteler Rebbe and drink a glass of spirit. Spirit is alcohol that's poison. It's rubbing alcohol. It's Zex and Nitzke. It's pure alcohol. So if you wanted to come to this Fabrengen, you had to be over in the Mitteler Rebbe's Gezerah. Now, how do you explain that? Now, I don't want to have a discussion on Mashke, and I don't want to condemn the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim, but I can promise you that Rebbe didn't mean that we should break the Gezerah because we're bigger Chassidim than him. But the Mitteler Rebbe was a different door. So the story goes that the Chassidim made a Fabrengen in a keller, in a basement, and if you wanted to join the Fabrengen, you had to drink a glass of spirit, and otherwise you couldn't come in. And the Chassidim was sitting in Fabrengen, and suddenly the door opened, and the Mitteler Rebbe himself walked in. He drank a glass of spit and he sat down at the Fabrengen. That's a story. Is it true? I don't know. But I'm telling it to you. That doesn't make it true, by the way. It just makes it that I'm telling you. It's true that I'm telling you the story. So, what's the pshat? Assuming the story is true, what's the pshat? He didn't mean it. It's hard to understand. Again, our Rebbe meant it. Our Rebbe wasn't into any kind of blunders. He meant what he said, and he said what he meant, conversation over. It was a different time. But the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim apparently had a problem with alcohol. I want you to know there's stories we know amongst Chabad Chassidim in other generations where there was this feeling that if you were not drunk, there was something wrong with your Chassidus. It's really true. There were communities, there were places where Chassidim drank on Hashem Mashke and it affected the Shalom Bayis and it affected their children. And there was a shita. It was a shita. I'm not saying that it was correct. I'm just telling you that it's true. That there were Chabad Chassidim, unbelievably strong brains, very, very smart people. Very smart people. But Chassidus is not just knowing stuff, it's serving the Eibishter. And there was a belief by some Chassidim in some places. There's a famous story with the city of Kremenchuk, where there was a certain Mashpia who he wanted to be a member of his Chabura, he made you drink. Not that the Rabbi necessarily approved of it, but there was such a inyan. So if I stories by the Mitteler Rebbe also, there was an alcohol problem, and the Mitteler Rebbe made it no alcohol, none. And again, I don't know much more about this, but this is what I know. This is what I heard. Number 3, the Mitteler Rebbe had a problem. The problem that the Mitteler Rebbe had was that his Chassidim were terribly poor. That I heard myself from the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, the Chassidim from the Alten Rebbe sind given Orem. Allah has kama v'kama, the Chassidim from the Mitteler Rebbe. The Rebbe said, the Chassidim of the Alten Rebbe were poor, and how much more so the Chassidim of the Mitteler Rebbe. Because the war between Russia and France, Napoleon, right? Right? Yeah. Napoleon conquered Russia. He took Moscow. And he knew that the Chassidim were against him. He knew that the Misnagdim were for him, the Chassidim were against him. When they left Russia, when the French ran out of Russia, they destroyed White Russia. They destroyed it. They burnt houses and businesses. When the Mitteler Rebbe came back to Lubavitch, remember the Alter Rebbe ran away from Napoleon. When the Mitteler Rebbe came back to White Russia was destroyed. Destroyed. People had to start their lives over. In other words, the businesses and the communities and the structure of life, the material structure of life was broken, and the poverty by the Mitteler Rebbe was unreal. Unbelievable. And it didn't help that the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim were someplace hanging between Akka and Atzilus because he taught them so much Chassidus. There was an enormous amount of poverty. And it bothered the Mitteler Rebbe. So the Mitteler Rebbe did something very, very practical. Unbelievably practical. He had connections, the Mitteler Rebbe connections. Remember, the Alter Rebbe already was considered, after the Alter Rebbe was released from prison, he was given a status as a special citizen. Not after the Alter Rebbe supported Alexander against Napoleon. The Russians knew that the Alter Rebbe supported the king of Russia, Alexander, against Napoleon. So he became an honorary citizen. The Tzemach was given a citation, an official legal document, Ezrach Nichbod L'Deiresav, an honorary citizen for all generations. And the Friedrich Rebbe told the Rebbe, we had this citation, which meant to honor citizens for generations, and we were always afraid for our lives. It was worth nothing, that piece of paper. But he had from the king of Russia, from the Tzad, Ezrach Nichbad, the family of the Rabbeim, the Schneersons, are honorary citizens for all generations. But it wasn't worth much. But by the Mitteler Rebbe, because of the Alter Rebbe's support for Alexander, the king of Russia at that time, he had some favoritism. So the Mitteler Rebbe asked from the government to be given land in the Ukraine, in a place called Khersoner. which is spelled K-H, Kherson, it's spelled Kherson. And the government of Russia gave him a huge... Kherson is the Ukraine. The Ukraine was and could still be the breadbasket of the world. It's unbelievably fertile. Things grow very well over there. There was a time that Eastern Europe provided bread for the whole world until a very nice guy named Joseph Stalin tried to collectivize it, and then he started from hunger in Kherson, in Ukraine. But Kherson was a very, very good piece of land. Things grew very well over there. And the Mitteler Rebbe got from the government a huge, huge tract of land in the Kherson, which was an unbelievable gift. And the Mitteler Rebbe relocated 2,000 mishpachas of Chassidim to become farmers, to have Parnassa. And it was strictly Parnassa. This Rebbe, who was mamish and elmas al yenim, was incredibly down to earth in this way. He built 2,000 mishpachas then, is today 100,000 mishpachas. 2,000 mishpachas of Anash were moved from Russia, where they had nothing to eat, to the Kherson, where they had Parnassa b'shefa, barchova, gedoyla, or Lechoved. And this was one of the big investments of the Mitteler Rebbe. And there's a Rishima, there's a Chassidim writer. The Mitteler Rebbe loved the idea of a Chassidish Yiddish farmer. Because a Chassidish farmer means it's close to nature. It's close to nature, it's close to the Eibishter. So the quote, the Mitteler Rebbe once said to his son-in-law, the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek, Herst Mendel, steht da Yid hinter den Acker, und der Dalet Kampf ist blasen im Wind, und zwischen mit den Eibishter, zwischen mit den Himmel ist kein Sach nicht verlangt. He talked to the Tzemach Tzedek. He said, here Mendel, a young man stands behind the plow. He's a behemoth, an animal, a cow. And the cow is harnessed up to a plow. And the cow is moving, and the person holds the plow to make a straight line, to make shudas, to plant. So he's standing behind the yakev, the plow, the animal's ahead of him, and the animal is walking, and he's keeping the plow straight. And the tal's cotton, the dal kanfas are blowing in the wind. He's not wearing a kapata. And between him and God, there's nothing. That's how the Mitteler Rebbe described it. He loved the idea of Fruma Yidden being close to nature. The truth is, it's beautiful. It's just in the modern world, it's not very, very economical. At that time, you could make a living Lechoved. And this was a huge, huge act of Poshet helping Yidden with Parnassa Begashmias. And of course, the story goes, in typical Chabad fashion, nobody wanted to go. Why? Chassidim was supposed to be poor, no? Chassidim was supposed to be shleppers, the poor. Farmers, normal people, get up in the day and go to work. You're supposed to be a shlepper. You go to shul till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, huh? The Mitteler Rebbe said, go and work. And they didn't want to go. And the reason that they gave was we're going to be far away from the Lubavitch. And we're not going to get the Chassidus, we're not going to have the Avodah, we're not going to have the Ashpah from the Rebbe. And they didn't want to go. So first is a letter from the Mitteler Rebbe, which is printed in Nigris. It's a sharp letter where he bawls them out. And he says that the Yidden came out of Mitzrayim and they got the Torah from the Eibishter and they became farmers. You could farm also. There's nothing wrong with being physically work with your hand. It's not on Chassidish, you know. And this was the feeling. It's a very sharp, printed in the Igris. But the Mitteler Rebbe said something else. If you go to Kherson, I promise I will come to you every year in the summer and I'll bring the Chassidish to you. I'll come every summer, I'll come myself to the Kherson. And I will bring Chassidus to you. I'll come to the different cities, and I'll chazak Chassidus, I'll say Chassidus, I'll Kapelie to the Yechidus, and so on. And they moved. 2,000 mishpachas of Anash, Lubavitch Chassidim from White Russia, which is the north, moved into central Russia, into the Ukraine, and they lived on these farms till the Holocaust. Over 100 years, 130 years come out, 120 years. And they had Parnassa Lechoved Gadol. And these families grew and grew and grew and grew. One of the strongest centers of Lubavitch and Lubavitch Chassidim and Tmimim was that the Rebbe was born in these. Our Rebbe was born in Nikolaev. Nikolaev is in the Kherson. Our Rebbe was born in a big city. Nikolaev is not a farm, it's a big city. But Nikolaev was the big city where the Kherson region is. And all the Chassidim who were farmers in Kherson, their Rav was the Nikolaev Rav. The Rebbe was born, our Rebbe was born there. That's how a bigger part of Chabad Chassidus, the colonies in Kherson came. The whole idea was the Mitteler Rebbe's brainchild. And like I said, it's just interesting how a Yid was incredibly down to earth. And he went once. The Mitteler went himself once. He traveled to the Kherson, which is a big schlep for him. He spent the whole summer, and then he became ill. Mitteler Rebbe was not well. At the end of his life, Mitteler Rebbe was sick. Last few years. It didn't stop him saying Chassidus, but he was physically very limited. And if you understand the history, the relationship between the Mitteler Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek in the last years of the Mitteler Rebbe's life was very similar to the relationship between our Rebbe and the Friedrich Rebbe in the last years of the Friedrich Rebbe's life. Mamish, like one person. The hand did not separate. Everything the Mitteler Rebbe did, he did to the Tzemach Tzedek because he was so limited. But he couldn't travel. So he called in the great Chassid, Rabbi Hillel Parasher. And he told him, I promised the Khersoner Yidden I'm going to come there in the summertime. I told him to come every year, and I'm not able to do it. So I want you to go as my shliach. And he told him the very, very famous words, Zeyin Ruchnius and Schneiden Gashmius. You should seed, you should plant sparks of Ruchnius, and you should harvest, bring back to Lubavitch money, Maimid, because they had money. And the Hillel Parasher did it every single summer till the summer he died. For the next 40 years, the Hillel went to Kherson, maybe more. The Hillel passed away in the summer in Kherson, and he's buried there. The Hillel Parasher, they made an oil. I don't know if it's still there. They made an oil of the Hillel Parasher. The Hillel Parasher was Rav in Parish, which is White Russia, but he's not buried in Parish. Every summer, that means from after Shavuos till the beginning of Elul, he would travel to the Kherson, and he would go from city to city. And when he came to the Kherson, he almost like a Rebbe. I don't know if he took Pedyenis, but he said Chassidus and he gave brachas. He went on the shlichus of the Mitteler Rebbe. The Mitteler Rebbe gave him one hira, and he did it every summer for the rest of his life. So through Rebbe Hillel Parasher, this Inyan, the Rebbe sent Yidden to live in the Kherson, and he gave them a lot of Parnassa. And then he made sure that the Chassidus would be brought to them. The region of the Kherson, like I said, was a Lubavitcher stronghold till the Holocaust, till the Second World War. Always Lubavitcher Rabbonim. Avram David Lavut, Rebbe Tzachana's grandfather, Rebbe Tzachana's father. Rebbe Shlomo Yanovsky was the Rav in Nikolaev. Nikolaev was the big city in the Kherson. So this was an example of the Mitteler Rebbe's practical side. The Tzemach Tzedek did a similar thing in a place called Sedirin. He also built colonies, but we don't know that much about it. Also to give Yidden Poshet Parnassa. Okay, next item. We have 20 more minutes. Oh, not bad. The Mitteler Rebbe also sent Yidden to live in Eretz Yisroel. We know that the Alter Rebbe supported the Yishuv of Chassidim in Eretz Yisroel. But the Alter Rebbe was supporting a Yishuv of Chassidim was not strictly Chabad. It was all the Chassidim together, because his Rebbe's went to Ram Kalisker and Mendele Haradoket went to Eretz Yisroel. And the Alter Rebbe supported was called Koil Chabad, still called Koil Chabad. That Moitzid of Tzedakah is over 235 years old, and it supports all Chassidim. The Mitteler Rebbe sent a yishuv of Chassidim to Lubavitch Chassidim to Israel. They were I think in Hebron, and later they were in Yerushalayim. I just want to clarify: the Mitteler Rebbe had a daughter whose name was Rebbe Menucha Rochel. You know about her. She also went to Israel, but she was not sent by her father. She was sent by her brother-in-law. The Tzemach Tzedek sent her to Israel. Because the Mitteler Rebbe sent Chassidim to live in Eretz Yisroel, and then in the next generation, the Tzemach Tzedek sent. And the Mitteler Rebbe sent a whole community of Yidden to live in Eretz Yisroel, and they had the same complaint. The complaint was, we're going to be far away from the Rebbe, what's going to be with Chassidus? And the Mitteler Rebbe said to them, I will send you the Chassidus, the Maimonides. And it's known that we have a lot of Chassidus in the Mitteler Rebbe. We don't have all the Mitteler Rebbe Chassidus, but we have a lot of Chassidus in the Mitteler Rebbe. But we don't have that many Kislev Yad Kodesh. We don't have the originals. We have copies. Because very, very often the Mitteler Rebbe wrote a Maimir. All the Rabbeim, besides for the Alter Rebbe and Ar Rebbe, wrote their own Chassidus. The Chassidim would copy it, and the original is in Eretz Yisroel. There are Ksov of the Mitteler Rebbe, which are found in the library in Yerushalayim, that exists no place else in the world, because the Mitteler Rebbe promised the Chassidim that he would send the Chassidus at Yisrael in a gehalten word. The Chassidim went. One of the most famous Chassidim was a Yid by the name of Mordechai Yaffe. He was a printer in Kopust. The Mitteler Rebbe asked him to go in Slavita, I think, or maybe Kopust. They should go live in Eretz Yisrael, and he sent the Chassidus. It was another part of the Mitteler Rebbe's practical side. And of course, you know the lumdus behind this. The lumdus behind this is that Api Aloche, we should all live in Eretz Yisrael. It's a big schus. The Gemara says, but you can't. So you send representation, and you support them, and by sending representation and supporting them, it's as if you're living in Eretz Yisrael. And all the Rabbeim were involved with Eretz Yisrael personally, From the Alter Rebbe, if you look in the Tanya and you get a Sakedish, it's all about Tzidkas Eretz Yisroel, sending money to support Yid in Eretz Yisroel. All of our Rabbeim were involved in what we would call Koilel Chabad. They were involved in sending Yidden to live in Eretz Yisrael and supporting them from Russia and now from America, so that they'd have a shaykhs to the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael. The Mitteler Rebbe, I already tried to describe to you his precious, his holiness, and his removal from this world, and his obsession with Chabad. He was obsessed with Chabad, obsessed. The Chassidim, the Mitteler Rebbe said, I have one wunsch, I have one hope. As zwei junge Leute sollen sich treffen, sollen wir reden, the Chassidim should meet, they should talk about Achdus Hashem. That's all they mattered. It's all that mattered to him and all that mattered to his Chassidim. But the Mitteler Rebbe also, in a very, very real way, gave a beauty to Chassidus Chabad, which you could argue pretty well was the height of Chassidus Chabad in terms of culture. Now, I don't know if you people understand, the word culture and the word religion, people put them into the same sentence, but culture and religion are opposites, unless you're not religious. If you're a secular person and you're studying other people's religion, you call it culture. But if you're a from Yid and you believe in the Eibishter, religion is not culture. Culture means the way people behave, the food we eat, the clothing we wear, the songs we sing, the way we talk, our mannerisms. It's all chitzenius. Culture is from chitzenim. Yiddishkeit is everything. Our whole life is Yiddishkeit. But Yiddishkeit also has how it looks, the appearance of it. Chabad has a culture. The center of Chabad culture is using your brain, learning and understanding and davening and all the rest. But there's more to it. There's Chabad Negina, Chabad music, Chabad Negunim. Everybody knows the nicest Negunim in the world, the Chabad Raya. Everyone sings our songs, huh? Everyone sings our songs. Maybe they don't acknowledge that there are songs, but everyone sings our song. I was sitting once on an airplane with a Reform Chazan. He's a Reform Chazan, a Reform Shul. And I was talking about the Alter Rebbe, and I said the Alter Rebbe composed Keliyata. The Alter Rebbe composed Keli in the Reform Temple, Rosh Hashanah. They see Keliyata. The Alter Rebbe composed Keli. I didn't know. Our Negunim are the best. They're the best. Everybody sings on Negunim, not because they like us. They like our singing. The Shenste Negunim, it's a style of Negina. On some level, it's a reflection of Russian Negina. The Chabad Negunim are very melancholy. They're not so happy. They're not so exciting, because that's what Russian people are like. Russian music is that way too. But Chabad Negunim also have depth. And there's types of, gaguyim, longing. There's Negunim Chabad that are quite bitter. There's Negunim Dveikus, Negunim that reflect the joy of being moment to Eibishter, and Negunim Simcha. Chabad is beautiful. And in many, many ways, the height of Chabad culture, and I'm using that word with advice, but I mean it in the deeper sense, in the more meaningful sense. In the times of the Mitteler Rebbe, Chabad Chassidus was as nice as it would ever be. And one of the symptoms of that is the famous Kapelie of the Mitteler Rebbe. The Mitteler Rebbe's Kapelie. Now, you don't know much about the Mitteler Rebbe's Kapelie, and I don't know much more. But there is evidence that the Mitteler Rebbe had a full staff of musicians and chazonim. Not one or two. You're talking about 15, 20 men who were paid full time to live in Lubavitch and compose Negunim and sing. It says in Hayem Yem, Bepeh u Beklei Shir, but a guy researched it. And some of the most famous chazonim in Russia, when they were younger, Leitlach, and nobody knew them, they were part of the Mitteler Rebbe's Kapelie. And then they grew up to be famous chazonim. The Mitteler Rebbe hired not one or two people, a staff of people, and lav davka they were chassidim, they were Poshet musicians and chazonim, to compose Chabad Negunim, and to sing Chabad Negunim, and to play Chabad Negunim. And there were occasions, as you can imagine this, where the Mitteler Rebbe would call in the Kapelie and ask him to sing and to play. And the Mitteler Rebbe would sit in Dveikus. It's like you have it in the story with Shaul HaMelech. That Shaul HaMelech was going through a depression. So they brought David HaMelech, who played the harp, and he played in front of Shaul HaMelech, V'hichim Menagin HaMenagin, V'tehi Olav Ruach Hashem. When he played nice music, it puts you into a good mood. So it's a keli for Simcha, for Ruach HaKodesh. So by the Mitteler Rebbe, this was a big deal. Now I want to tell you something. We know the niggid that's called the Mitteler Rebbe's Kapelie. What other Negunim did the Mitteler Rebbe's Kapelie compose? Most people assume they composed Pada B'Shalom. Most people assume they composed Nyezhir Yitzchak Loptzi. I believe they composed Aneres Halolu, even though there's a story which is attributed to the Chassidim Marash. They composed the Bichas Koyanim. And you find a Bichas Koyanim like ours. People don't do ours, but gosh, ours is good. You ever go into another show, listen to Bichas Koyanim, it's really not Gishmak. Lubavitcher Bichas Koyanim is the best. Now, I'm brainwashed, closed-minded, and biased. I'm not going to deny it. But it is the best. The Mitteler Rebbe said about his Kapelie, when they composed that little tnua, that's the Psugi getroffen, wie man gesungen in the Beis HaMikdash. That's the answer to your question. That the Mitteler Rebbe said that they created a tune which matches the way they were duchen in the Beis HaMikdash. Now, what that means, I highly doubt that in the Beis HaMikdash they sang like Russian Goyim, but the teuchen of the Negina, we don't know how many Negunim the Mitteler Rebbe Kapelie composed. We don't. But it probably was hundreds. They probably composed many Negunim that are lost. They probably composed many Negunim that we sing. And forgive my candor, they probably composed many Negunim that we have completely destroyed because we sing them wrong. Because they hired a group of people to compose Negunim, but to sing Negunim, they did, I'm sure they did their work well. But this was part of the breitkeit of the Mitteler Rebbe. The Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim were very poor. And the Mitteler was oizgerechnet mit Geld. The Mitteler wasn't wasting money. It was very important, the Mitteler Rebbe. And it wasn't important because it looked nice, you understand? It wasn't important because he wanted to be a king. It was important because it was Negei in the Chassidus. By the Mitteler Rebbe, the Negina was Negei in the Chassidus. It says in the Sichas Rafidike Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe had angeführt by Chassidim the Negina. It says in the Sichas the Alter Rebbe had angeführt by Chassidim, the Alter Rebbe wanted Chassidim to sing. Now, you have to think about this. Music is beautiful. Music is beautiful, yeah? Is Avodas Hashem beautiful? Avodas Hashem is emes. Avodas Hashem is a leiv nishbar, self kol self, it's a broken heart. How do you make emes beautiful? In other words, if the Negunim are perfect, then they're chalanas, they're bluff. If the Negunim are emes, then they're not beautiful. But in Chabad Chasidus, these two opposites converge. That Rabbeim wanted that we should sing, und singen richtig, sing. But the Negina speaks emes. This was one of Bechlal by Chassidus, but the Alter Rebbe wanted Chassidim to sing. And the Alter Rebbe said that learning the Tanya is half. Learning the Tanya is half. The other half is Negina. You want to reveal your neshama, you want to fill your heart, you have to sing. And the Negunim are beautiful. But the Negunim are not beautiful culture, nice songs that you do at a concert, at a performance. Negunim are just tefillah, before davening, during davening, and after davening. Negina in Chabad was beautiful and emes. And by the Mitteler Rebbe, this was perfected. He Pashat had a group of people whose job it was to compose Negunim and to sing Negunim. Now, when the Tzemach said he became a Rebbe, I'm going to talk about this later, he was mevatel all of these in Yonim because of the government. In other words, it should have continued, but the government started to meddle. They accused the Mitteler Rebbe of wasting money, and part of the money he wasted was on these compositions, on these chazonim. So a lot of traditions which you had in Chabad, but the Mitteler Rebbe stopped, which is why I'm telling you that in some ways you could almost say that from a cultural angle, from an angle of external aesthetic beauty, Chassidus Chabad, as much as the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim were not in this world, was by the Mitteler Rebbe. And another example, this is really funny, is the Mitteler Rebbe had a stable of horses that did performances like a circus, like acrobatics. And the performers were young Chassidim. And from time to time, the Mitteler Rebbe would come out and he would tell them to do their performances, to get on their horses and to ride, whatever they did. They stood, they rolled, I don't know what they did. It was a push it entertainment. And you ask yourself, really, this is religion? this is Yiddish, this Avodas Hashem. For this you're spending money the Chassidim give you who are poor? And the answer is you have to understand who the Mitteler Rebbe was to understand how it's possible. It was a part of the Mitteler Rebbe's Nesias. This Yofi. Now how often did it happen? I don't know. What was the point of it? I don't know. But I promise you the Mitteler Rebbe wasn't doing it for entertainment value. You understand? It wasn't because he needed to be entertained, he needed to relax, he had to go to the theater, so he brought the theater to him. It was an inyan pnimi. It's hard enough to understand how the Mitteler Rebbe had to have on staff an orchestra and a choir of Chazonim to understand that there were young Chassidim who did maneuvers. And one of the Chassidim who participated in the maneuvers on the horse by the Mitteler Rebbe was his own son, Reb Nachum. And there's a whole arichas asipur that Nachum once fell off a horse and he was almost killed. And the Mitteler Rebbe said to be besimcha, and he didn't stop till he cured his son with simcha. It's a famous story. But by the Mitteler Rebbe, there were things that are pashut beautiful on the outside. On the outside. And if you and I did it, it would have no soul. When we sing Lubavitch and Negunim, that the niggin sounds good is much more important than the niggin speaks what's in our hearts. By the Mitteler Rebbe, and even by the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim, there was a lot more emes. There's a lot more emes. And there were other things. And these were not unique to the Mitteler Rebbe, but the Alter Rebbe, they also had it. There was something called a Yechidus Tanz. Yechidus Tanz means that there were nights that the Rebbe had Yechidus. I don't know how often the Mitteler Rebbe had Yechidus. But when the Rebbe had Yechidus, there were Chassidim in Lubavitch. So when you came out of Yechidus, before you had a chance to even think, they would grab you and pull you into a dance. But the way the Yechidus Tanz was done was only the Chassidim who went into the Yechidus danced. The rest of the Chassidim would stand and watch. It was part of the tradition, a Yechidus Tanz. By the Alter Rebbe had a Yechidus Tanz, by the Mitteler Yechidus Tanz, and the Tzemach Tzedek stopped it. And the Tzemach Tzedek stopped it for the same reason, because of Ein Abisha, there was a lot of, Lubavitch was doing too well. It looked too good. And the government started to meddle. So a lot of things Tzemach Tzedek quieted, pushed aside. So we shouldn't look so good, we should look more nebuchdik, more outwardly pathetic, so the government should leave us alone. This was all part of Ezra and Nichbah, that they say, they're always looking over their shoulders. But by the Mitteler Rebbe, there was all of these cultural components, and I don't mean culture in a chitzanias way. It means that the Hasidus had a beauty to it. One of the most unusual parts of Lubavitch history is Chassidim had a niggin, which is called Baruch Elokeinu, Shabbat Lechoved. It's printed in the back of the Ken of Chabad. It was a song about how, thank God we're Chassidim and thank God we're not Misnagdim. We're lucky we're Chassidim, not Misnagdim. It's a whole story, many, many words. It's based on the Avotia, Baruch Elokeinu. Nobody knows the tune. Nobody knows. We have the word. Nobody knows the tune. Because the Rabbeim outlawed singing it. And they actually listened. It wasn't like the Mashke, you know what I'm saying? The Rabbeim said, no one alive today knows the tune. We have the words. But by the Mitteler Rebbe, this was the famous niggin, you know. I got my Chassidim, you know. But at one point, someone said, no, I think that Tzemach Tzedek said enough. And I don't think so much because of the Misnagdim, was because of the Goyim and Goyishkeit. But we have a number of examples. I just gave you 4 of things by the Mitteler Rebbe where the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus was not only beautiful on the inside, the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus was also beautiful on the outside. There was something about it that was so special. It was so special, so beautiful. And it lasted 15 years. Mitteler Rebbe passes away. Tzemach Tzedek becomes a Rebbe. And the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim was so disappointed. Tzemach Tzedek was a very, very great Rebbe. But he was a normal Rebbe. He was on this earth. You know, Chassidus was once a week, for a half an hour, or twice a week. But the Mitteler Rebbe was like 15 years of a non-stop party, a non-stop Fabringen. That was the kind of tension there was. Okay, I'll see you when I see you.